Creating a web application with Node is very simple since the Node.js runtime already includes everything needed to start a simple HTTP server. Additionally, there are a lot of libraries that extend the basic functionality of the included HTTP server, allowing you to write complex services. A web server is an application that listens and handles connections. A client connects to the server and requests for a resource. The server will get that resource and return a response to the client. This is the basics of the HTTP protocol. A client requests a resource, and the server returns a response. For each request, there is one response. If a client requires more than one resource, it must make multiple requests. The request contains information that is sent to the server to know what resource the client wants, the action to execute in the resource, and even a body that can contain anything that you may require sending to the server. The HTTP protocol defines the request to contain the following information: the request line, which is composed of the method, the request universal resource identifier, and the protocol version. Methods are get, post, put, delete, options, head, and connect. The request URI is the identifier of the resource in the server. And finally, the protocol and version, in this case is HTTP 1.1. When you create a microservice, you use the combination of HTTP methods and URI structures to define what actions a client can take on your data. By convention, the HTTP methods maps to the following actions on your data. The get method reads data, the post method creates data, the put method updates data, and finally, the delete method removes data. Then, you identify what data to modify using the URI section of the request. A get over /clients will return a list of clients. A get on /clients /123 returns the detail of the client with the ID 123. A post on /clients adds a new client. Additionally, this call might return the information of the newly created client. A put on /clients /123 modifies the client with the ID 123. And a delete on /clients /123 deletes the client with the ID 123. As I mentioned, in the request you may provide additional information to create or modify records. But before we get into that, the request can include information that describes the request itself. This comes in the form of headers. Headers are key value pairs, and they are used to describe the request. You can add information relevant to the server, commonly the content type, encoding, the user agent, and custom information like authentication keys or credentials. Finally, the request may contain a body that could be anything: a file, a form, a serialized object in XML or JSON format, etc. Before we go on, there's another way to include information in the request. This is through the parameters in the URI. This is used in RESTful web service to provide search capabilities over collections of data. Now, the response part of the protocol. Responses contains the status line, headers, and a body. The status lines tells you the status of the HTTP request. This is commonly a 3-number code. Codes starting in 200s are successful requests. Codes in the 300s requires additional actions from the client, like notifying that a resource has moved and no longer is available in the requested URI. Codes in the 400s tells you of a problem in your request. Either you required more information or try to access something that doesn't exist or got no permissions to access it. Finally, the threaded 500s refers to errors in the server and usually refer to exceptions not being handled that prevented the request from being fulfilled. Next, the response contains headers that are like their request counterparts. They describe the response and contains information that might be useful for the client. Finally, the body of the response is returned. This could have any format, be it a file, serialized object as XML or JSON, or even nothing at all. But how do you create a web server in Node? You know the basics of HTTP. Also, you know that you must handle requests and write responses for each request. So the simplest web server is created using the bundle HTTP server in Node. This is very easy. In this demonstration, I won't use npm project. I will do it with simple Node.js. Open a new text editor. Save the file. Name it server.js. And remember where you saved it. In my case, I used the home folder at /home/oracle. Now, servers require a port number. I create a port variable with var port equals 80808080. Since at some point I want to deploy all my samples to the Oracle Cloud, I must use the port from the Oracle Cloud or a default one to test locally. This is done with the following syntax. Var port equals process.env.port double pipe 80808080. This uses the environment variable port if available, or 80808080 for my port variable in my Node program. Now I need the HTTP server module. This is done using the require method. Var HTTP equals require HTTP as a string, and that's it. To handle request and generate response, you need a function. Create one. I'll create it with var request handler equals function request response as parameters, and then inside of the function I will just simply log using console.log request URL. I will log the URL of the request, and then I will finish the response using response.end hello world. The request and response objects are provided as parameters. You can read data from the request, and you should write the response. To finish the response, use the end method. As a parameter, you may supply the body of the response. Now, create a server using the HTTP module and the request handler function. This is done with var server equals http.createServer and then the function that will handle the request, in my case, request handler. And finally, make the server listen for the request in the port variable. This is done with server.listen port. With this, the server code is complete. Save the file. The server will always respond with a hello world message when any URI is accessed. If you would like to filter by URI to return different response depending on the requested location, then you need to modify the code in the request handler function to check the request.url value and then add code to handle it. As you can imagine, doing this is a little too much complicated. I could take a lot of code just to parse the URL and deciding what response to return. Instead of doing that, in the following lessons I will use a framework called Express. But for now, let's just run the code. Open a terminal window. Now go to the folder where I saved the server script and run node server.js. And that is all. The server is running in the port 80808080, and now open a browser and go to http localhost 80808080. Notice that hello world is displayed in the browser and the slash is logged in the terminal window where the server is running. Browsing different URIs inside the same server gives the same response but logs a different URI in the terminal window. Now that I have shown you how to create a simple server, try it on your VM. You may experiment with different messages and even try to parse the URI or read the request headers. Refer to the Node HTTP module documentation for details on what is inside the request and response objects. When you're ready, continue with the following lesson where I show you how to receive and send data using JSON.